it's quite appropriate. It's a local businessman. I say local, he's from Norfolk.
Bring the real cats in.
What's interesting about this story, though, is that although it's a Norfolk story, there are precedents of it around the world. There's a Jewish version, there's an Indian version, there's one from somewhere else in Europe. And when you find a story like that, it's often because it's got lots of really good teaching in it. And some of you might know. So, this is Pedal of Swine. Long ago, and not so long ago, in a village called Swaffham in Norfolk, there lived a man called John Chapman, and he was a peddler. And he lived with his wife Catherine and his 3 children. And one night, he was fast asleep, having his usual dream of good friends and good wine, gin at the Angel. And suddenly, a little man in a red coat popped into his mind and said, Go to London Bridge, go and be quick, good'll come of it. And he was so shocked at this interruption to his dream, he woke up, shook Catherine, and said, Catherine, I just had a dream. Catherine went, will you shut up and go back to sleep? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. John thought better of it, went back to sleep. 5 minutes later, back into his dream, the little man in the red coat pops up again and says, Go to London Bridge, go and be quick, good'll come of it. So he wakes up again, he says, Catherine, I had the dream. The man told me to go to London Bridge and good would come of it. And Catherine said, Oh, John, you believe anything, just go back to sleep. Went back to sleep. And sure enough, a couple of minutes in, the little man pops up and says, Go to London Bridge, go and be quick, good'll come of it. He wakes up, he looks at Catherine, she's looking hungry, he thinks better of it. He goes back to sleep. Now the next morning, he wakes up, he puts on his backpack with all his pots in his hands. He goes in to his stall, sets them all out, starts selling, but his mind's not on it. His mind's still thinking about that dream. And so at the end of the day, he looks across the road, he sees the church with its spire. He goes across the road to speak to Master Fuller. And Master Fuller is the priest of that church, and he is a very, well, let's face it, he has no room for humour. He's very gaunt, very serious looking man. And John says to him, Master Fuller, I've had this dream about going to London and good will come of it, what shall I do? And Master Fuller said, You dream, I dream, we all dream. Why don't you try and dream some gold to mend this church? Because it's a disgrace to God. John thinks, gold, I wish I could. He goes back home again. And he's sitting there that night and he's having supper. It's very quiet. Catherine says to him, You're still thinking about that dream, aren't you? He says, Yes. Catherine says, Well, if it's still on your mind, then maybe you should go to London Bridge and see if good does come. John says, Yes, I will. I will go and be quick. So the next morning, he packs his pack with his food, a bit of money, and off he sets off with his trusty hound, because no one should go on a journey without a trusty hound. And he sets off and he walks the 5 long days, the 5 long nights to London Bridge. And it rains and it pours, and sometimes in the morning, him and his dog, they can't get up because their bones ache so much that they keep going. And when John gets to London Bridge, he's not really sure what to do. So he just starts walking backwards and forwards along the bridge. And on the first day, a group of pilgrims come across on horseback. And they're saying, to Walsingham we go. John thinks, well, Walsingham? Oh, that's near me. I've been there 100. Maybe that's what my dream means. And he goes, oh, wait! And they've already gone. So him and the trusty hound, they sleep in the inn that night, and the next morning they get up and they walk across London Bridge, backwards and forwards, backwards. And this time a man with a bear on a chain comes along. And he says, oh, give us some gold, I'll make the bear dance. John says, oh, maybe not today, but I'll give him a pound. He takes it out. And the man says, no. He had a handoff in Cambridge, wasn't it? John says, well, that's a very nice travelling companion you've got. And the man says, don't you disrespect him. He'll bite your head off. John says, much like his owner. That's away. They stay in the inn that night, and that's the last of John's money, so he knows that the next day is going to be his last day. So he walks backwards and forwards along the bridge. It's getting to late afternoon, and a man, shaped like an egg, so the story goes, comes out of his little shop, and he says, excuse me? And John says, yes. He says, I've been watching you these last 3 days, going backwards and forwards. What are you doing? John thinks, might as well tell him. So he tells him all about the dream. And the egg-shaped man laughs. He says, dreams. He said, dreams don't mean anything. Do you know, only last night, I had a dream about some bloke from a place called Swaffham who had a pot of gold buried under the hawthorn tree at the back of his garden. Nonsense! Who ever heard of Swaffham? You better get yourself home. John thinks about it. I might just do that, he says. And so John and his trusty hounds, they walk the 5 long miles, all the way back. And Catherine and the children give him a big hug when he comes home because they miss him. And he tells them about what the egg-shaped man said. Catherine said, well, better get our spades. So Catherine and John go out to the back garden and they dig underneath the porch. And they dig, and they dig, and they dig, and they dig until clunk. They hear metal on metal. And they dig around and they pull out. And when they open the lid, sure enough, it's full of gold. I said, Catherine, what should we do now? Catherine says, better take it inside. So they take it inside and they put it on the table. And then John notices something on the lid. There's an inscription, and he doesn't understand it. So he says, I know, before we do anything, Catherine, we'll translate this so we know what it means. So the next day, he puts the lid in his pack with his pots and pans, and he goes to market. And he's there setting up his stall. Master Fuller comes along. He says, John Chapman, I did not see you at Mass on Sunday. John said, oh, I'm very sorry, I was out of town. He said, but I wonder if you could help me with something. You're a learned man, and I've got this lid that I found, and it's got some writing on it. Could you maybe translate it for me? Master Fuller says, of course, but if he likes to be useful. And he reads it, he says, well, I don't know what it could possibly mean, but it says, underneath me doth lie another, richer, far than I. John says, oh, I can't think what that could mean, but thank you very much. As soon as Master Fuller's gone, pats up his pots and pans, raises his hand, says, Catherine, Catherine, we need to keep digging. So this time John and Catherine and the kids and the dog, they all go underneath the hawthorn tree and they dig 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 and finally, clunk. Metal on metal. And they dig round and they pull out an even bigger. And sure enough, the bigger pot is just as full of gold as the first one was. John says, I know what we'll do now. We will keep 100 pieces of gold for us so that we can live well and buy a good plot of land. The rest we will take to the church. And so they take the big pot of gold, and the dog and the children and the wife and John, they all walk through the streets and say, come with us, good has come, good has come. And they go into that old church and they call out, and they say, Master Fuller, come. He comes out saying, what's all this fuss about? John tells him the story and shows him the gold. And for the first and probably the last time in Master Fuller's life, he throws his head back and laughs. And all the villagers celebrate and they sing and they dance and they drink good ales long into the night. And if you go to Swaffham to this day, you will see in the church the statue